Okay, let's do this. It's been a great year so far in terms of my reading, and I have been gushing over all the books that I've read so far this year. I can't say there's a science. I didn't have any formula for picking the books that ended up being really great. I have nothing but stellar reviews for each of them. However, this video is not talking about all the books that I've read and enjoyed this year, or even how I came by them. But it's because there is no science. It's really more of an art than a science. If you wanted to cheat, you would go by reading the same books or reading the same authors that you've always enjoyed, hoping even then you're not fully guaranteed that you will enjoy the new read by that familiar author. However, for me this year it's been great. I think I've had only 2 DNFs so far this year. They were really disappointing. Make it 3. Recently I read Butter, and I'd been looking forward to reading that, and it turned out to be quite a letdown. I hope to make a video about why it was so. Now, this video is really about my recent reads, books that I read recently and thoroughly enjoyed. The first of them is Toni Morrison's Beloved. Yeah, I know, I'm late to the party. Regardless, I have read it now, and I can't say, how happy I am that I have. And again, even then, I am sad that I read it. It was deeply moving. It was a book club pick, and I do believe many of us had the same comments to make about it, which was that it's a tearjerker more or less. However, it's also reminiscent of Octavia Butler's Kindred, which I have reviewed in a previous video. With Beloved, in Beloved, Toni Morrison tells the story of Stig and Paul D, who are black slaves living in Ohio, I believe it should be, post-Civil War. And just about this time, a lot of the slaves were freed, but also dealing with the trauma, dealing with challenges post-freedom or post-emancipation. And in Beloved, Toni Morrison tells something of an uncanny story revolving around 3 main characters, as I mentioned: City, Paul D, and Beloved herself. And Beloved is central to the stories because then you find out at the end of the book, or in the book, that she is more integral to their stories than they thought, or even you won't even know till the end. And there are certain details, vignettes, and flashbacks that are unraveled in the storytelling that leave you really gut-wrenched. I know if you read Kindred by Octavia Butler, you'd be moved to tears too by the realities and reality of cruelty that slaves faced. But I think Toni Morrison actually drives the knife even deeper by some of these very sordid realities that people, flesh and blood people had to deal with in those times. I identify as a father, I identify as a son, I identify as someone's friend, someone's brother, and I cannot imagine having to live every day of my life never knowing what is going to become of my wife, or going to become of my son or my daughter, knowing that there is always a chance, a possibility that a slave master might wake up one morning whether on the bad side of the bed or under duress by conditions surrounding him, to either take my wife from me and betroth her to his maybe son, or take my children and sell off, into slavery. That's something in the words by which Toni Morrison delivers and manifests these realities, quite nerve-wracking. I mean, you're most likely gonna need therapy after reading this book, more or less. But great read. I enjoyed it. There were a few things. I mean, as I mentioned, it covers the topic of slavery. Talks about racism. It also talks about certain aspects of human psyche, or even psyche of men, especially. There were some ruminations by Paul D, who at some point, his ruminations about being a man or being a black man, and it's to paraphrase, there are words or expressions like, it is hard, it is very hard, and if the realities that I tried hard to paint are anything to go by, it definitely is hard, or definitely was hard for him. There are also issues or the themes of afterlife, of suffering, of community. Toni Morrison paints a picture of a community as well that is there for its members, and in a very moving way as well. It was consoling, and I think that theme itself is a thread of the hope that Toni Morrison paints, or the thread of the story of hope, or story of hope that Toni Morrison paints into the canvas that we know as Beloved. And again, we can go on and on talking about the beauty of Toni Morrison's use of language in this book. But I think what she does best of all is in the way that she balances the sadness, the despair of the time that she writes about, but also in the end about the hope that she suggests or gives us hints of. And I want to thank her for, she's no longer with us, but I thank her for sharing this piece of work. The other books in the trilogy, as I found out just this year, and I'm ashamed. I just found out this year that Beloved is actually the first of a trilogy, Jazz and Song of Solomon, and not trilogy in the conventional sense, or in the sense that you may know it, being a set of books or a series of 3 books revolving around one story, but rather in the classical sense, trilogies are basically works that can be categorized as one telling of a single theme. So for her, I believe it was a thematic consideration for coupling these 3 sets of works as a trilogy. And again, beautiful work. I do see myself rereading this. I have very few books that I try to single out for rereads in subsequent years or in subsequent months when I can get a chance to. And I believe that Toni Morrison is worthy of such pilgrimages. So, Beloved by Toni Morrison. The next book is I'm picking these books not in the order in which I read them, though with Beloved it came first before every other book in this selection that we're going to be talking about. But for this second one, I just finished that. It was a penultimate book that I finished recently. We're talking about What Thunder by Myriam Chancy. I got a recommendation for this book by Caribbean Reads on Instagram. Caribbean Reads on Instagram. I hope I'm getting that right. If I'll link to the Instagram accounts that I got the recommendation for this book on. And What Thunder is a novel, a Caribbean novel that revolves around stories of different characters who were impacted by 2010 earthquake 5.0 on the Richter scale, I believe, just about earthquake in Haiti. And I loved this book from the first chapter. When I started reading this, from the first chapter, the language in which Myriam paints her scenes, the way that she kind of rehashes or even paints these characters, the voices in which they spoke, they're really relatable, but they're also poetic. I think that's one of the things that really attract me to great writers, which is the poetry of their languages. They are not necessarily academic, they're not necessarily flowery, but they do have a way of putting simple words together to paint vivid pictures in your head while you read the story. And Myriam does this very well through her characters. Now, we have different characters in this book who were impacted by the earthquake. We have a matriarch, Malu, who is more or less in the center of this novel, whose life kind of overlaps or touches every other character that you read about in the book. We have Richard, who is a businessman. He's probably the one that you would hate the most. I know I hated him. He's not a good guy. However, he was impacted by this earthquake in that he had a wife with whom he had a daughter, and he left behind. He did not acknowledge he took some responsibility for the child, but he moved away. He turned his back on his family. He moved away, far away, I believe, to Europe. Was involved in an NGO that provided water to third world countries, I believe. He was in touch and had connections with his homeland in Haiti through insidious means or connections. I don't know, but not that I don't know, but he wasn't exactly a very pure or flawless character. He was flawed, and all the characters here are flawed except for maybe Malu and Anne. However, there is a common thread here, and in different ways that these characters are being impacted by the earthquake. Myriam tells us the stories of personal challenges, of personal journeys in their lives, in their lives in Haiti, before the earthquake, during just about the time of the earthquake, and after. We also learn about one of the other very interesting character in the book was a drug trafficker who you would think you couldn't relate with, but you most likely will. He had more or less a conversion. He has a conversion story, and I think that's one of the beauties of this story, is how you find the characters vilified, but then given the benefit of doubt and given an honest opportunity to grow, to to actually let their stories unfold, even if sometimes they don't find redemption. And I enjoyed What Storm, What Thunder. Great read, well paced, and I do believe that it's one of those kind of books that you would auto buy. I know that she has another. This was released in 2021, so I'm pretty much late to the party. However, she has a new book out, and I would really much like to get my hands on that too. So yeah, What Storm, What Thunder, great read. My next selection is a book that I could not wait to share a review on with you, which is Death Under a Sky by Stig Abell. Now, how did I come across this book or come by this book? I was in the library and I saw in a section, they usually have a section where library staff pick a book and they leave a review or a rating and recommend reads to library visitors. And I saw it, and my first thought when I saw this, you can look at this cover, I was thinking, oh, maybe this is something. Definitely I could tell by the blurb that it was a mystery thriller, but I also had images or thoughts of something maybe noir, something in the style of Wallander, something grim, something Nordic. But when I started reading this book, the first chapter gripped me. I was like, wow, this is great. Now, the crime had not even started and I was already immersed in the storytelling. Now, Stig Abell is, I believe, a radio commentator. He's a Times contributor, and this is actually his debut novel. Now, after many years of immersing himself in a lot of works and conversations around those works of crime, thriller, decides to take it up, and we find in one of the commentaries that he takes us on in the book. He talks about how even his editor didn't want to take it on because he thought it was probably crap, or it was likely to be crap. But even he couldn't help but definitely pitch it to publishers right after first read. Stay with me now. First thoughts on the book is that it is a love letter to all the sleuths, the crime writing that you've known before, the legends. We talk about Agatha Christie, talk about Hercule Poirot, talk about G.K. Chesterton, and he actually gushes over their procedurals, how chaste the poetry of their prose might be or might have been. And I think I admired the book and I admired Stig for writing a love letter to all these sleuth works of whether amateur or of professional sleuths, Sherlock Holmes. So I give Stig kudos for sharing this beautiful work with us. Now, going back to the synopsis of this novel, Death Under a Little Sky. Little Sky happens to be a name of a property. Now, it follows the story of Jake Jackson. Yes, Jake Jackson, who is just coming out of a rough patch as a husband who failed marriage. The end or sitting on the end of his career as a detective, and he just wanted to go away, hide, and perchance his uncle has died and left to him a property called Little Sky, and has more or less just where can I find this kind of uncles? Has left his property to him. Everything is taken care of. There is money in a bank account. You can't withdraw more than $1,000 over a particular number of days or something like that. You know how it goes. And he's pretty much set, and he has an opportunity to start his life afresh in a faraway place, to live as a recluse and do pretty much whatever and live the rest of his days in peace and quiet. However, a case finds him as a bag of bones is discovered and kind of compels him through certain circumstances to actually investigate the origin of those the bag of bones and reopen a cold case. We find in this book also some really charming characters, which are whom I've come to call by. I believe her name is Olivia. Yes, his love interest in the book as well. Now you will love this. Now it's not fast-paced. It might even be categorized as a cozy crime fiction. When you read it, please let me know, or if you've read it, please let me know what you think. However, I found it very logical. There are no ex machinas, not so much, but the drama is is well paced. The weaving of the stories of these different characters making sense, and were enjoyable. So I enjoyed reading about each of the characters in the book, guessing who the culprit might be, and also the conclusion. He nailed the end or the payoff, and it was in all a great read. Now, what did I like most about the book? I already talked about how it's a love letter to the greats, Sherlock, Agatha Christie, Chesterton. However, I think what I loved most about it was the musings about reclusive life, and I loved how Stig wrote about the beauty, the serenity of the landscape, the idyllic lifestyle of a reclusive detective, and I think he actually nailed this one for a debut novel. Masterful. I believe he won an award for this. This is a debut novel, so but I was also pleasantly surprised to find that he has released another a sequel to this, and I really look forward to reading that too. Now, following Stig Abell's paper trail, more or less, because I've tried to hunt down any reviews or tidbits that I could find on his Twitter account, and I found it quite interesting that he had some really good things to say about another mystery writer, Elly Griffiths. Again, I think I'm really late to this party, but this happens to, so I picked this up on his recommendation, and this is Last Remains by Elly Griffiths, and it turns out to be the 15th and last Ruth Galloway mystery, and it was quite a good read. I enjoyed reading this. This isn't cozy, right? Because the facts or the details of the mystery in this story quite grim. The characters are anything but charming. They are insidious. My God. But anyway, Last Remains follows the story. Another mystery lands on the lap of Ruth Galloway, famous archaeologist who is also in the throes of academic drama, and where a skeleton is found behind the walls of a of a cafe, used to be cafe, and this was about to be renovated. And she joins forces with Nelson, whom followers of Galloway Mysteries would remember is the CID who has been by her side throughout all her stories. And she investigates the identity of that skeleton, and also while opening the case, that cold case, is thrown into the middle of dangerous twists and excellent procedurals or tasking procedurals to uncover the culprit of a 15-year-old murder mystery. Great. So I enjoyed this one. The storytelling, it was really tight. It's about 360 pages. I think you could finish this in a few hours or 2 days or 3 days. But it was definitely a worthy peak after Stig Abell's recommendation, however unwitting. My last book is trying for an ASMR sound effect there. Okay, so we have Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Anguish and Anarchy, the finale to the Orisha trilogy. I previously hinted at the release of this book, so I pre-ordered it earlier in the year, and was only so glad to receive it in the mail like 2 months ago. I believe it came out in June, so I was really happy to get it. However, I listened to the reading by Cynthia Erivo, read the Children of Anguish and Anarchy by Tomi Adeyemi. I previously talked about this in expecting this book in the previous video, and how I was looking forward to it. Now it was worthy wait, because Tomi Adeyemi nailed the payoff in this finale. There are so many layers to this. Now in this finale, we see the Orishas, the Mages, the Orishas, the soldiers unite against a common enemy, and the fight scenes are just classic. Now I'd like to talk about, because I didn't read this, I rather listened to it, I can speak to the delivery of Cynthia Erivo in this one, and it was masterful. However, it might have helped if she got some more training in terms of pronouncing some Yoruba words and the incantations of the warriors. Now, if you haven't read Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, it's a classic example of a fine telling using Yoruba cosmology or mythology, and the characters here, Tomi Adeyemi is able to portray, singing the high praise of Children of Anguish and Anarchy. There are so many areas that we can talk about how Tomi really checks the boxes. For instance, magic system. The characters here, you have the Gaians as well, whose magic system is a little bit reminiscent of Gaia. Think the thing, being able to manipulate the earth, greenery. So they do have, for their force field, what would be force fields, they have the skill or the ability to weave vines around themselves that obstruct or serve as obstructions or if blockage, or as a shield to spears or fireballs and whatnot. We also have fire wielding or fire wielding powers, or pyrokinetic powers. You have also not necromancy, but you have bloodthirsty or blood magic axes used by the enemies in the book, used by Balder's army. Balder is the villain in this book, who was behind the catastrophe at the end of book 2. And in this book we find the final confrontation with Balder's army, but also running tangentially with a search or quest by Zilye and Inan, while they look for a chosen one who would give them or guide them in the way that they can overcome Balder's formidable army, before I say team. All right, so this was I would say this was a highlight for me in the year, or is a highlight for me so far this year. And of course, Tomi Adeyemi is a force in herself, a great personality, and she infuses this book and this story with the high energy, the fast-paced action, well choreographed battle scenes, fight scenes, and the very, I would say, very colorful, very theatric characters in this book. Now, I can't say Zilye was my favorite. If you ask me who my favorite was, it'd probably be Inan, who is more retrospective, more not demure, but definitely, I think, more relatable, I would say, in his search for himself. Of course, Zilye also has to find herself in the story, and at some point finds does that at a cost. Find out what that is when you read the book. However, with that said, that's all for my recent reads, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And until the next one, happy reading.